Good morning, Flutterbys. It is Butterfly. So I just wanted to do a quick video. I'm drinking Tetley. Gosh, this morning I got up, I don't know, lately I've been getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm starting my day for some reason. Anyways, I got up, I had coffee, now I'm drinking tea. Not that you need to know all that. Anyway, I wanted to give you just a quick lowdown on I'm starting a journey with this book. It's about the inner child. So you know my background is I'm a registered early childhood educator. At least I'll be registered until the end of this year, 2020. Sometime soon I'll probably be registering under another college, as my career is going to be changing back to more of a mental health, addictions counselor kind of a thing. So when I'm done my program, something's going to change. But yes, I still have training as an early childhood educator and developmental psychology. So what does that mean? That means that I'm tending to integrate a lot of the information that I have had previously into the my career now. And I'm finding that inner child work is really where I want to learn more about. I know, surface information, but really going through a lot of the work itself can be tremendously healing. So going back to meet my inner child, and actually as this author, Cathryn Taylor, talks about it, is inner children, because each child kind of has a different experience. A 3-year-old will experience things differently than a 7-year-old, and a 7-year-old will experience things differently than a 12-year-old. And so I have an appreciation of what children, how children process information developmentally through the years. And so I'm going back and doing work with them a little bit more specifically now. So I want to share some of that with you. In fact, I want to share in this video just the introduction to and how this book is kind of built. I believe there's 10 sections. Anyway, let's just take a look here. 11 sections. Okay. So essentially, I'm looking at the first section in this video. The next sections afterwards. So the first section that I'm talking about tells you how each of the subsequent sections is divided and how the work will unfold. The subsequent sections, chapter 2 onward, are different developmental sessions of the developmental stages of your inner child, or inner children, so it were. So the second chapter is the infant self, then the third one is the toddler self, and then the younger inner child, the grade school children within, the young teen, the adolescent, the young inner adult, and the young inner adult goes to 17 to 21 years. And then the chapters 9, 10, and 11 talk about other things. So that's basically the map for my journey, and I invite you to come along with me. Now, as with most things on my channel, I don't know if I'm going to be doing all the chapters on my YouTube channel. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to be going through. I'm not going to commit myself to doing absolutely every channel or every chapter. Like for instance, when I did the book on Wicca, I went through select chapters and kind of wet your whistle to kind of look at the sections of the book that I found most interesting to show you. When I went through astral travel or astral projection. The last few chapters I had completed on my own, but I found that I was losing so much sleep and it was becoming so involved that finishing that on the channel was like more than I could give. I wanted to take a break, and then I never actually went back to resume it. So that's part of my process. I accept that about myself. So what does that leave you as a viewer? Does that leave you dissatisfied? It might. it might. So you need to know that. However, I'm approaching this as a reader and sharing some of this information with you. Hopefully, if you get through some of this information on your own, if you're really truly interested and you need to have support, you can either talk to me, introduce some kind of a commentary, down below in the section down below, or ideally, if you're needing more of a therapeutic approach, then as the authors will say in the book, you need to have somebody who's a bit of a counselor, who has that responsibility to kind of work with you and take you through that journey in a responsible way. So I'm just letting you know that the information is there. The other thing is that there's something that's I'm really keen about, and that is the ritual and ceremony part of each section that I'm really kind of excited about to explore. And so let me get to that with you. I only have a limited time because actually I have to, very soon, in about half an hour, I have to kind of go to some group work that I'm doing. We're a few students I'm part of a student group where we have a project that's due this week. So I only have a limited time to share this with you, so I'll bear that in mind. So these books, these kind of scrapbooks, I'm really keen on, and I do a lot of sort of journaling in books like this, and I summarize. So here is some of the summary. I don't know if that actually shows up backwards on the screen, but that is some of the work that I have done. And then, of course, more summarizing. I don't know if that's even useful to kind of show you. You can make sense of that. But as I'm reading the book, I am summarizing things. So here's the first section. It talks about your inner child and how you are vulnerable as a child and how you end up carrying fear and anger and shame and despair. And you also carry love and happiness and joy. And when you kind of cut off with the way that you're thinking, when you cut off the shame and the anger and the fear because you need to deal with difficult things in your childhood, you're not only cutting off those nasty feelings and trying to stay safe in your own developmental stage, but you're also cutting off the joy and the happiness and the love and all the positive things as well. So what you learn as a child is that at some point it is not safe to feel. When you feel, you are being vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, perhaps the adults in your life at that time were not able to kind of carry you through and make sure that your safety, that you felt safe, right? So you learn to protect yourself in the best way that you know at that age. And a lot of the ways that you adapt to those situations when you're young then affect your relationships and the way that you interpret things in your later life, in your adult life. And it still plays out probably on a daily basis in your life today. So that's why it's kind of important to look back at the inner child and to find those messages and those maladaptive ways of dealing with stress in your early days so that you can better deal with things today, because you need to relearn how to better adapt to those situations. So am I explaining that well? I'm sure that you get it. Now, what I'm really keen on, and I'm not going to go through all of this specifically because there's a lot of information in the book, and let me know if you are interested, because if you do have questions, I'll certainly either make another video and answer those questions or answer them down below, but certainly ask questions, okay? So each developmental section in this book is further divided into 6 steps. The first step will introduce you to the task that you have to master, and it identifies your pain. The second step is basically to research your pain and interview yourself, your body, and look at how you treat your body. Step 3 shows you a bit of regression, and so that you can actually experience the pain that you were feeling at that point. Step 4 will show you how to objectify the pain that you have, and then how to interact with it in a healthier way. And it also specifies that when you're talking to your inner child, not to talk to your inner child as I, as the younger you, the I, but to objectively interact with your child and say, you the 3-year-old, you the 5-year-old, you the 7-year-old. And I think that's one of the things that I want to end up doing too when I'm looking at the practice of, and when I do the ceremony, to kind of relinquish and put an end to certain things. So there's a ceremony at the end of every section. I think I actually want to make some kind of a doll, like a puppet. That's always how I've used witchcraft. I've disclosed that I use witchcraft. I'm a pagan that uses witchcraft with Catholic roots that kind of linger within me. So I don't know if those puppets will necessarily be made out of paper so that I can burn them easily and put end to certain things, or if those puppets will be something comforting and sewn together so that I can snuggle and cuddle and kind of speak to it on an ongoing basis. I don't know yet, but I'm going to be going through those sort of things. Okay, so to address your inner child as you, I speak to it as somebody outside. So when you're seeing a child who's going through this, what would you say to that child? So if you're using the word I, then you're still kind of approaching that as a child and not as an adult. So that's why that is an important technique. Step 5 talks about an approach by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and also by Alice Miller, but more so by Ross, and that is the stages of grief. Right? So there's 5 stages of grief. You know that. That's been made pretty popular. So grieving your inner child's pain. So when there is grief, there's the loss, the bargaining, the anger, the despair, and then finally the acceptance. So loss can include something like in your life that you've experienced, either your own loss or the loss that you've experienced with your parents, like they had a divorce, or somebody else died, or somebody was ill and you as a child had to take care of somebody, or you as a child were very ill and you lost something developmentally because of that. You lost time, you couldn't go out and play. There's loss, divorce, death, or betrayal. Then the second stage of grief is bargaining. So sometimes you do prayer, sometimes we engage in spell work. I find it was really interesting when I was reading about that because spell work can sometimes be looked at as a way of bargaining. If you want to control your environment, you want to see what kind of things that you can do to control what is happening around you, and do you really have that kind of control? And can you really say, okay, well, I'm responsible if something doesn't go the way I want, right? Is that really bargaining? Is spell work really bargaining? I really kind of looked at that because, oh, geez, I should have done it at a full moon rather than the gibbous phase, or I should have used, this herb as opposed to that one. I don't really know that there's really that much importance on the tools and the products and the things that we do during spell work, but more the mental process of the spell work. And that when you do that mental process with spell work, you really, really imbue things with your energy, as we say. Do you really, really have control over your environment? Or are you pleading with a god or goddess? Are you pleading to make a change that can happen? And is that bargaining to try and deal with the loss? I don't know. And the answer is probably different for me than it would be for you. It's probably different for all of us in giving you different, spell working. But it's definitely a question that came to my mind when even if you're not doing spell work, if you're doing prayer, if you're doing invocations, if you're doing conjuring, all of these things, you're interacting with someone, an entity, and is that a bargaining process? And how much control do we really have over that? I don't know. The third stage of grief is the anger. So your child, your child may hold this back, may hold back the anger. May not express the anger in a healthy way. So kind of a feeling of anger when you're going through loss. And so that is part of the healing phase as well. When you're going through these and examining grief. Grief work is really, really important. The fourth stage of grief is despair, which can manifest itself as an exhaustion or a collapse or a depression. I think that is probably something that I've experienced quite a bit, and I also sort of struggle with, will I really be on medication for the rest of my life? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or if I actually do just enough psychosocial work or healing mentally, will I ever be able to get rid of that one little pill that I take every day? And is it necessary? I don't know. I kind of really wonder about that thing. Does the depression kind of get set early on in life, and is it something that has to last for the rest of your life? Is that those early years, is that a program that can't really be recalibrated? So that's a question for me, and I know that a lot of people are on antidepressants, and I don't know. Perhaps you have some thoughts on the matter. Some people go through that and stop taking antidepressants, and they are able to get off antidepressants and then live their life quite well. I know that the longer that you postpone treatment, like pharmaceutical treatment, the longer and the more resistant your recovery is. That's what applies to me. I went very, very long. I was 29 years old before I started taking antidepressants, and I've been on them ever since. So that was 20 years ago. And I went through the worst kind of depression, which is, what's the worst kind? Well, I had an attempted suicide, right? And it was not a call for attention. It was, maybe I should tell you about that one day. Maybe that's a whole other story. That was a serious story. And no, it was not a fluffy thing at all. Oh, why am I laughing? Okay, I'll have to explore that. Anyway, so despair is the fourth stage. And then the fifth stage is acceptance. So that's what the step 5 is in this book, as you go through your stages of your developmental stages. And then there's a step 6, and I'm really excited about looking forward to doing this step 6, because that's the witchcraft part of it, or at least if it's not, I'm going to make it that way. And that's it talks about Joseph Campbell, which is a mythologist. We in this community know Joseph Campbell, and he's a mythologist, and he says that we need to ritualize the change in order to make it tangible. So you know how in religions there's ways to mark certain stages, like baptism or bar mitzvah, or marriage, hand fasting. What else is there? All kinds of different kind of stages that you kind of go through. In Catholicism, you go through different there's communion and confession and confirmation, and different religions have these set markers where you ritualize a thing, and it gives you a rite of passage to say you've gone through this, and now you're part of the adult community, or you're gone through this, and now you're part of the coupled community. You're off the dating market, or whatever. And so in step 6 in this book, my understanding of it is that it goes through a final ceremony of healing, where you heal your pain and reclaim your joy, and you put a tangible sort of a marker. So for me, I know somehow by hook or by crook, I'm going to be including incense and candles and maybe some herbs and maybe a ceremonial bath, or I don't know, but I'm looking even more excited about it because I love my own personal rituals. But there's going to be a fair amount of journaling, no doubt, in it, and probably a walk in the forest or something. I'm not entirely sure, but that ceremonial part of it is going to be a closure, because you need to have that closure to that developmental stage in your life where you've healed that part of that inner child. Not to say that I can't revisit it later, but that it's a marking and a recognition of a transition from one stage to the next. These messages I used to have, I no longer need to tell myself these things, and I've moved on to a healthier part of being. So as I go through this, I may choose to share these process, with you in video, not necessarily because I want to make myself all bloody and vulnerable and all that kind of stuff, but because I think that I have lived a seriously full life. My early years were not very flowery and pleasant. A lot of times I had some challenges, and I don't think that my experience is that different from many other people. We all are human. We all go through vulnerable things, and we take away messages that that may be maladaptive in our younger years, and that sets the pace for our older years. Because there's a lot of, I mean, face it, when you're young, you only have so much control over the adults in your life. You only have so much wisdom with which to work. You're kind of adapting by the, flying by the seat of your pants. And it may not always be the best choices to kind of get through from this day to the next. And when you carry those messages and people didn't treat you the way that you feel that you should have been treated in the younger years, we carry that into our adult lives, and then it ends up being addiction, and it ends up being marriages that don't stay together, or unhealthy relationships, or it ends up being, a defensiveness or a sense of whatever it is, superiority or neglect or whatever, or vulnerability that ends up continuing in your adult years. And it really shapes who you are and your life choices, and it shapes your career and the way that you interact with people at work and at school and everywhere. So I don't think that if I do choose to go through this in a video way, and reveal whatever it is that I reveal as I go along, whatever I feel comfortable with, I invite you. I will be inviting you to share, your own experiences as well. And I know that even though some things I may be showing some vulnerability, I know that you can relate to it as well, and that you can take what you need to go about your own healing journey. Because one of the most healing things that I've learned is that I'm not the only one. That my experience can be related to the experience of other people. And there's some people who have made themselves vulnerable by telling their story, and by going through healing, and by expressing, what they took to go from point A to point B in their life, and what got them over things, and that it was very, very healing for them. And I draw strength by looking at those kind of role models. The other thing that kind of applies to me is that as I've been learning about addiction, I don't think I have, I've never been addicted to kind of drug substances or alcohol or that sort of thing. But I have been doing the school program. I'm on the end of my school program working with addiction and mental health to learn how to be a counselor and a better counselor. And so what I've learned through that program is that what applies to me is that my father was addicted to alcohol and prescription medication. And he went through that. And so it did have an effect on me. I am the adult child of an alcoholic. And interestingly, when I read about the adult child of the alcoholic, those things apply to me. When you read about ACOAs, adult child of alcoholics, that information really applied to me. And so I did not get through those years unscathed as I thought I had. When I was about 20, I got a book, my first book about adult children of alcoholics, and I thought I had been unscathed simply because my parents had divorced in my early, they had their final separation when I was about 9, and they divorced a few years later. And I thought, well, I, only have limited memories of my father being an alcoholic in the home. And so generally speaking, I started reading these books and being really surprised that, oh my goodness, I really identify with this material. One of the things that you learn about being codependent and living with that kind of dysfunction around is that there are some messages within the family. When you look at family systems theory, you look at those messages, and one of those messages is you don't tell, you don't feel, you don't trust. Those are very important messages that you learn when you're young. So I observed those messages well before I could even articulate what those were. And one of the things that I have found most healing over time is to be able to tell, to be able to talk about it. And that has always been a big struggle, because when I talk about some of the experiences that I've had, when I talk about it with people who are not of my family, they can listen and be supportive. But when I talk about those things with people in my family, with the exception of a few people who are emotionally more mature, I get those messages of don't speak, don't feel, don't trust, don't tell, feel, don't trust. I get those messages like, no, I'm not listening to you because I don't want you to tell me to take sides and blah, 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 blah. There's high defensiveness, there's interruption, there's every kind of maladaptive response, even though I'm using I statements about my experience. I learned very, very young to not speak about my experience because it's not safe, because other people feel vulnerable and can't deal with it emotionally. They just don't have the maturity. So I've learned to accept other people's limitations and their need to blame or whatever it is, depending on the situation. And that's been my experience growing up. So later on in my teen years, there was a thing that happened, and I knew right away I should not be talking about it, because if I did, I would be blamed. I knew at that moment, and that's why I was chosen to be a victim, because because of the lack of resources and because of the sick dynamics. Even though I could not articulate it, actually I could have explained those dynamics, those toxic dynamics, but still, I was still in a very unhealthy system with very little resources. So the message was, you can't say anything because you're just going to be living a further hell. So I'll be exploring those issues as I go through this book. And I think I feel, I'm 49 years old, man. My hair is gray. I feel a lot more emotionally mature and a lot less vulnerable than I did when I was a very younger person. And I feel ready to do this work. And I think, I'm not going to commit myself, but I think I feel ready enough to share some of it, because I think it could be of benefit. I really think everybody should do inner child work when they're ready. I don't think everybody has to, disclose things to the world. And I certainly will choose the way that I do that. But I think I can do it in a way that's relatable and responsible and helpful. And that's my goal, is to do it in a helpful way, not as a way to vent, not as a way to get back, not as a way to name names, but to explain my process. And hopefully my view is that other people will begin to heal as well, because I, amongst many people, will be, going through a process. Now, the other thing is that, quite frankly, if there's no interaction on this video and other videos, then that may limit, maybe there's a lack of interest, and that may limit what I choose to say or how many videos I choose to make. But it's definitely a process that I'm going to be doing for myself, whether there are videos on this or not. Yeah, because I'm ready, and I also don't, people. The people who will would be one of those, what do you call those, Debbie Downers? Those people who will be making negative comments to me personally for whatever reasons. And they're not my motivating, they're not, if they make negative comments on my channel, which so far I haven't had any negative comments on my channel, I don't think. I haven't really had to delete any comments or whatever, but like just saying that, I'm aware that it could happen. People have talked about, having those naysayers and haters on videos. So I'm aware that it can happen. But I think I'm ready for that. YouTube just looks at it as interaction anyway. But I'm more interested in, somebody that I know personally ends up seeing a video and starts saying whatever defensive reactions that they may have. Those are the ones that I would have been more concerned with in the past. And so I'm saying I'm going to be making I statements, and I'm going to be speaking for myself, and I'm not going to be naming any names. And I don't think there's anything that I could say that's not part of some kind of public knowledge anyway. And that my experience is probably very relatable to much of anyone else. And kind of, all those people who get over it. Well, I'm over it, and here it comes, I think a lot of people have a lot to gain from hearing how these experiences are very common. The interpretation of what happens to us in childhood is very common. Some people went through way worse things than me. I think mine is probably an average childhood because, is there ever really a functional family anywhere? I mean, mine's not that bad, is it? Anyways, but still, very few of us get through life unscathed, and my adult life has been a lot more positive and a lot more, wonderful, and I've tried to make it as wonderful as I can for my own children. And I think childhood is extraordinarily important. So therein lies my motivation to make the world a little better place with my contribution. So if you have any comments or questions to leave down below, please do so. Let me know what you'd like to know. And here again is the book. I have another Inner Child book upstairs. Don't remember what the author is, but I'll maybe if I go through another book afterwards, maybe I can share that with you. But for right now, this is the one I'm going through, and I'm pretty keen on it. And I don't think it's going to be going very, very quickly either, because there's a pace to it. There's work that you need to do at each stage. And although I was just going to go to the developmental stage that was first, more interesting to me, I think I am going to try and exercise some kind of discipline and go from the beginning to the end and not skip parts, because already the introduction has opened my eyes a little bit more than they were before. So, okay, onward and upward. I wish you well. Have a great day. Spring is coming. It's around the corner. So, take care. Toodles.